Hello there. Welcome to the New Israel Fund's Human Rights Awards dinner at home. And it is at home. I'm Jonathan Friedland. It's right here in my home for now. Looking very much forward to the hour we're going to spend together and the remarkable people we're going to introduce you to. I'm delighted to say that there are over 600 of us together tonight, which is a record-breaking figure. It means that this is the largest ever Human Rights Awards evening that the New Israel Fund has hosted in a decade of laying on and staging these gala evenings. So well done to all of us for breaking that record right from the very beginning. There are other records I'm very keen we can see if we can break. I'll make that clear as the evening goes on. What a weekend this has been, with such momentous news coming from across the Atlantic. It feels like it's been so long since there have been election results that we can actually feel very good about. And so this one, I think, brought first relief, then joy to so many millions of people across the world. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that very, very many of them now feel they can, at long last, glimpse the light after 4 years of darkness. In our own community, however, we did have so much sadder news last night. The death was announced, of course, of the former chief rabbi, Jonathan Sacks, a man who brought great honor on the Jewish community and was, of course, deeply committed to Israel. And I know that many of us will be mourning his loss tonight. So, tonight. We are going to be together, as I mentioned, for an hour. We'll be listening to some live music that has been performed especially for us and hearing some riveting stories told by amazing people. Just wait till you meet some of them. We'll be doing it for one very direct purpose, which is to raise money for an extraordinary organization that does extraordinary things. I'm very glad to say that I've had the privilege of fronting these events for 4 or 5 years. It may even be more, who knows. Usually that was in person. Tonight we're doing it online, which is obviously a new experience for all of us. On the one hand, of course, it's a great shame not to be physically together in the same room. On the other hand, there is a slight plus, because it means I don't have to spend 20 minutes at the front asking all of you to take your seats. Please be quiet, stop talking to your friends, shush in the back and in the corner. So swings and roundabouts, I think, really on balance. Now, some of you will already know all there is to know about the New Israel Fund. You will be world authorities and complete experts, so you won't need to hear any explanation from me. But I'm glad to say some of you are with us for the very first time, and so all of this will feel very brand new. And so with that in mind, I thought it would be useful to give a little flavor of what the New Israel Fund is and what it does. And I could do that with a very long online speech. I'm sure you would all love that. You'd want to hear that. But instead, I thought, since we are using the medium of video, we're on screen, we should let a little short film make the point for you. Now, put very, very simply, it works like this. You give your money to the New Israel Fund, and then the New Israel Fund gives that money to hundreds, even thousands of organizations, large and small, that work to make Israel a fairer and better place. That's it. It's as simple as that. You give the money to NIF, they give it to extraordinary organizations which work day and night to make Israel fairer and better. What kind of organizations are they? I thought you might ask that. Glad you have, because here is just one of them, a group that we've honored in the past, and you can just take a look at them to give you an idea.
The Mobile Clinic is a group of doctors who goes every Saturday to the West Bank together, Jewish, Arab, Israeli, Palestinian doctors who goes and open a one-day clinic in a different village. So from a school that exists there, we go and we're arriving in the morning, and for 4, 5, 6 hours, it becomes a clinic. Every doctor takes a room, and we bring also medications without, and then all the village, and many times it's people from around villages are coming and get treatment.
الوجع كان والله ضغط كثير، ظل عندي وجع راس، يعني مثل حدا مثلا بده إشي مني أو حدا يرن على الجرس مثلا ما اسمعش
معها، يعني تفكر إنه إحنا بنحكيش يعني معاها إشي، هي مش سامعينه.
تفهم الحكي عن طريق الشفايف، فحكوا لي إنه بتيجي جمعيات على المناطق، على البلدان، على القرى، على المخيمات. شوفوا حاولوا إنكم تتواصلوا معهم، بلكي ساعدوكم. هسا بدها سماعات، والسماعات مبلغ عالي، يعني مش بسيطات ثمنهن، فوق ال 4000 شيكل 5000 شيكل. مش قدرتنا عنا نأمنهن، وركبوا لنا سماعة عن طريق الإخوان في الجمعية، مشكورين.
بعد ما ركبتوا لها السماعات صارت يعني منيحة.
الأول كنت يعني كثير يعني بتضايق، بس الحمد لله رب العالمين يعني بعد ما ركبوا لي السماعات يعني صرت أحسن بكثير.
Everyone who supports us is supporting the basic health rights to everyone who lives here in Israel and the Palestinian territories. We try to change the reality, change the policy. To support us, it's to support a better society, a better future for everyone.
Like I said, you see, brilliant people doing noble work, and all the groups that you'll be helping tonight by giving through the New Israel Fund are just like that. They are brilliant people, brilliant organizations doing noble work to make Israel a fairer and better place. So that's the New Israel Fund. You've just seen it there in action through one of those groups that receives money, your money, when you give it. So remember, that is what tonight is about, among other things. So you can give even right away if you like. The details are on your screen now. If you're watching on full screen, by the way, you need to click out of that. I know some of you are not as across the tech as others, believe me, I know. I feel for you. But click out of full screen, scroll down, and you'll see all the details there. And it could not be simpler. And if we can think about maybe potentially giving right away, then you get the advantage of being able to sit back, relax, and enjoy the full hour with that feeling of virtuousness. Some may call it smugness, that allows you to feel relaxed that you've done your bit early on, and you can then just kick back. We have already, no figure just yet of how much we've raised, but I think some of you will be writing and making your contributions in early. I will be following the progress of that as it happens through the evening, giving you a running total as we get it. So we'll wait for that. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking tonight, of all nights, as we have to meet virtually because of a pandemic. You'll be thinking, look, times are tight here, thanks to the pandemic. There's lots of important and necessary causes that need our help right here at home in this country. And of course, that is true. You can't dispute that. But the pandemic has hit Israel too. And it's hit very hard, as I think we all know. And that's made many of the problems that the New Israel Fund tackles that much tougher. Not only that, we're going to see the impact as the evening goes on, as we tell the stories of our award winners and how they've managed to deal with the crisis during this year. And we'll hear those stories. But first, for more on what the New Israel Fund does, and particularly how this year has had a sharp impact on the New Israel Fund, what your money can do and why it's needed now more than ever, here is a message from the man who runs the fund's operations in Israel.
Good evening. I'm Miki Gitzin, NIF's Israel's director, and I've been in this role for 3 years. I have a long connection with UK NIF, which began a decade ago when I was studying for my master's at UCL. My personal experience helps me understand how the New Israel Fund allows people to connect to their values and Israel firsthand. Even in a period like this, where sadly we cannot be together and you cannot be on the ground with us. I also know firsthand the power and importance of your Human Rights Awards. I was humbled to have been presented with your Human Rights Award in 2013 as founder and head of Israel Chofshit, Be Free Israel, a religious freedom charity. So whilst it is bittersweet that we cannot be together in person tonight, I'm delighted to be able to be with you, to celebrate this year's awardees, and to share with you how NIF has responded to the challenges of 2020. We've all been tested by this pandemic, a pandemic that has brought to the forefront the ways in which inequality makes the most marginalized members of our society even more vulnerable. On a personal level, each of us has been called on to adapt. Some of us have really struggled. We've lost loved ones, we've lost jobs, we've shifted to taking care of our friends and families in new ways. The New Israel Fund's task has been to see the big picture and line up all of our resources we can in order to help all Israelis make it through this crisis. We've been doing what we do best, bringing together our supporters from around the world with shared mission. In this moment of crisis, use our collective resources, expertise, and relationships to help make things better. We're ensuring access to healthcare and information for all, including African asylum seekers and Palestinian laborers. We demand testing stations in East Jerusalem and PPE provided to all ambulance services. NIF, working hand in hand with the network of organizations we support, also succeeded in helping to protect most economically vulnerable, standing up for the employment rights of pregnant women, aiding single-parent families in the ultra-Orthodox community, ensuring access to disability benefits, or addressing the lack of online learning for Israeli Arab kids when their schools were closed. This work literally helped to save thousands of lives and livelihoods. This evening's awards winners were at the heart of this response. ACRI was not only integral work protecting the most vulnerable, but it proudly and effectively stood up for Israel's democratic institutions and the civil liberties of all residents. And Israel Women's Network and Women Against Violence were there, raising public awareness about the increased risk of violence against women during lockdown and ensuring better support and protection. At the same time, on the national and global level, everything feels unclear and extreme. The fear, the uncertainty, the corruption in our politics. There is so much to worry about for the future. This is why I'm so inspired by the civic reawakening we're seeing in Israel. Whether it's the tens of thousands of Israeli citizens who've taken to the streets, gathering at Balfour from this summer for weeks on end in front of the Prime Minister's residence, or those active in their communities. It feels like there is a raw, untapped energy for change. In moments like this, I like to remind myself that progress is not merely counted in Supreme Court battles and fights in the Knesset. It's not just about the latest campaign, however urgent it may feel. Our work is not just what we can photograph. It's hard, slow work behind the scenes, the stuff we don't write about on the front page. It's investing in leaders, investing in ideas, investing in the work of cultivating movements for change. Building an enduring, resilient, progressive civil society may not always be sexy. This is the real story of NIF, today and for the past 40 years. And I can reassure you, it's essential in this moment. Thank you for being part of NIF's story. You should never underestimate how important or how impactful your contribution can be. And I also know from grantees on the ground how meaningful your support from the UK is to them. As we come through the challenges and uncertainty of 2020, I can feel the energy for change, for building a better world. And that change is not possible without NIF, and even more importantly, without you. So thank you.
Our thanks to Mickey Gitzin for that message. And as you can see, by Israeli standards, he absolutely dressed up for the occasion. He knew it was a big dinner. That's the full Israeli tux he was wearing there. I was impressed. And I think the message, in all seriousness, hugely important, because it means that New Israel Fund's work is needed more now than ever. You heard there how the organization is equipping people to cope with these extraordinary circumstances of the pandemic. Now, it brings us seamlessly to the first of tonight's awards. I don't think any of us needs a reminder of how important democracy is. It's the sort of thing you didn't have to say before, but these last 4 years, I think, have shown everybody how central it is to our lives, but also how vulnerable it is, and how vital are those people who stand up and defend it. I think one reason why the last few days have been so moving to so many people is that we did see people insist that their voice matters, that every person matters, and that every vote matters. And there is something very powerful and very stirring about that. We, of course, have seen just yesterday the difference that that can make, how when people stand together and exercise their democratic rights, it can bring hope even after a long period of despair. So look, that's true of America, but it is absolutely true of Israel too. Even before the pandemic struck, there had been a year really of political turmoil in Israel. 3 sets of elections in the space of about a year, each time yielding an uncertain outcome, precarious governments, and a tremendous uncertainty. The pandemic and its handling have brought Israelis, I think Mickey referred to there, out onto the streets in huge numbers in more or less constant protests. And there have been repeated attempts to shut down those protests. The country's democratic values, in other words, have been severely stress tested. Which brings us really to our first award winner, which is the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, or ACRI, a group that understands both how vital democracy is and how fragile democracy and democratic institutions can be, and doesn't just understand that, it works tirelessly to defend those institutions. ACRI saw very early that the pandemic might pose a very specific threat to freedom. It understood that those in authority, the authorities, might, under cover of COVID, seek to seize the moment to erode some basic human rights and civil liberties. And since then, and always, ACRI has stood ready as a check and a balance, holding back the stampede before it tramples on essential rights. ACRI, the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, has long served as the New Israel Fund's right hand when it comes to civil liberties in Israel. And tonight, in something of a landmark, they become the first organization ever to receive this award for a second time. The significance of their impact and their contribution was just too great to ignore. And so the first of this evening's Human Rights Awards goes to ACRI, the Association for Civil Rights in Israel.
In any moment, the executive branch, the government, can take over, undermining the role of the Knesset and the courts. And this is a huge danger for democracy. And we were the first one to stand up and say, wait, a state of emergency and emergency regulation cannot take over all the democracy.
There are huge demonstrations going on throughout the country because of the political crisis from before Corona and since, and because of the reaction to the Corona crisis.
חופש הביטוי וחופש ההפגנה זה אחד הדברים היחידים שנותרו לנו כאזרחים ללכת ולעשות ולהביע את מורת רוחנו על איך שהשלטון מתנהל, ובעצם להשמיע את הקול שלנו בתור העם, בתור האזרחים, במדינה שהיא דמוקרטית.
If you take away our freedom of expression and our freedom of movement, then it's not a democracy.
The task of a human rights organization in the midst of a crisis is a watchdog and a protector from those who want to weaken democracy and the rule of law.
אתה ראית את הקטנים שלי מקודם, הנכדים, מדברים על ההפגנות. הערך הכי חשוב שהם יבינו שהם שווים, שיש להם משמעות לעובדה שאם יש להם מה להגיד, יש להם את האופציה ללכת ולהגיד את זה. זה ערך חשוב, שגם ילדים קטנים שעוד לא מבינים כלום, הם יודעים, אנחנו שווים.
At the end of June, when the numbers start rising again, and we had a second wave starting, the government passed a legislation that allow the use of the Shin Bet to track people with COVID-19 and everybody that was in close contact with them.
This means that I can be walking down the street, and if I walk past someone who later will be found to have had corona, that I might get a message from the Ministry of Health that I need to self-quarantine for 14 days.
Another very extreme tool that was given was allowing the police to receive data from the cellular companies to know the location of everyone that was quarantined.
On the face of it, during the crisis, it seemed maybe to most people like a good idea, but it's obviously a slippery slope and it has grave implications for democracy. Not to mention that there have been many, many mistakes and many people have been sent to self-quarantine that were never in the place that they were told they were. There's a slew of other implications for using this technology.
Widening the powers of the security services to get involved in a civil health crisis is very dangerous. It's turning Israel to a surveillance regime that we don't want to live in and is in contradiction to basic values of a democracy and freedom.
If you become a country that's using mass surveillance tools, people know the government can know where they are, where they were, who they were meeting with, and totally invading our privacy, then there is no democracy.
Approving the secret security to track civilians for a civil crisis sets a precedent for whatever the next crisis may be. It's not that other countries aren't fighting corona using technology, they are, but they're not doing it in the same manner. We need to find a balance between the authorities and fighting the crisis and preserving basic human rights and democracy. And it's not black and white and it's not easy, but that's exactly why it's so important that we're here to call out when we see that this is a blatant infringement of human rights and civil rights.
I'm delighted to say we're joined now from the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, ACRI, the first of tonight's award winners, the organization's executive director, Sharon Avraham Weiss, and with her, the director for their work in the occupied territories, Abir Jubran Dakwa. Congratulations, both of you, on tonight's award.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll take this opportunity to thank NIF UK and the community supporting them. It's an honor for us to receive this award for the second time and to appear before all of you tonight.
Excellent. Now, we've seen from the film the work you obviously do, as the name suggests, in the whole area of civil rights and civil liberties. But we know that you have a much, and that particularly the work you've been doing during this current crisis, but your work obviously goes way beyond that. Why don't you take this opportunity just to fill us in about some of the issues that you're dealing with in terms of people's day-to-day lives, particularly people under pressure in socioeconomic terms, in terms of just putting bread on the table, and the kind of pressures that are on there. Why don't you fill us in with some of those bread and butter issues that ACRI, your association, works on?
You know, why? I think I'll start with education. I think education appeals to everybody. So the gaps in education and socioeconomic status are now widening with the coronavirus. We petitioned to Supreme Court to make distance learning accessible to all students in Israel, as 400,000 of them, mainly students from the unrecognized villages, Bedouin villages in Israel that are not connected to the electricity grid, but also to students in East Jerusalem and that live in difficult conditions, and also children of asylum seekers in Israel. We demand that all online lessons will have access to those students, and we also demand that all online classes would be translated to Arabic. And our education department produced 14 lessons that are online lessons that are broadcasting via the Ministry of Education to everybody in Israel about democracy. So we did a lot of things, and this is only about education.
And Abir, this question of language and access to services, that's a crucial part of your work.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We successfully demanded that the National Employment Bureau translate unemployment benefit forms into Arabic. Following our appeal, the Bureau announced that it would begin to offer phone services in Arabic and helping people to fill the forms. Also, we successfully demanded the public broadcaster provide real-time Arabic translations of the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health news about the COVID-19. And also, we had an important petition to establish ritual purification centers for diseased Arab citizens from all the three religions, Muslim, Christians, and Druze, who were confirmed or suspected COVID carriers. And the petition also included having a opening center of telephone hotline in Arabic and for assistance for families of victims from the date of the death through the removal of the body and to transfer it to the centers. This petition is still pending in the court, which is important for a lot of families in a crucial time in their lives.
And so what we're seeing is that language isn't just about being inclusive and pluralistic. It really is a matter of life and death. It can be very, very serious. Sharon, just tell us what people here away from Israel, here in Britain, what we can do to support the kind of work you're doing.
We know that NIF, UK and ACRI work closely together, and this is the second time we've gotten this award, which is amazing. We encourage you to keep engaging these issues, bringing them to the light with your networks and communities, and being ambassadors or advocates for these important issues and for all the work that ACRI is doing.
And what is in the future for the Association for Civil Rights in Israel?
In the bright future, there will be no need for our work because there will be equality and democracy. I don't see it coming very soon. So I guess we are still going to have work around, but there is progress. Things are moving, not as fast as I would like them to move. But I think if you look on the 50 years of history of ACRI, things has been changed, and we did impact in Israel, and I hope we can continue doing it with your support.
Well, exactly as Sharon says, with your support, people who are watching tonight, you can help ACRI and groups like it make that crucial difference, even some cases a life and death difference to those who most need our help. Sharon, Abir, everybody at the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, thank you for joining us. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well, you heard there again, really, from those people at the front line of this, that they need us to engage. And my word, you don't hang about. I mean, when just before we introduced that award for ACRI, The running total of donations for the evening stood at £117,000, which is obviously great. But now I'm delighted to tell you it stands at a whopping £200,000, £200,500. That is a huge figure, but really we are only just beginning. We need you to give and keep giving in that same vein of generosity. So a reminder, you can do it right now. If you're watching on full screen, you need to click out of that so that you can scroll down, and you'll see embedded in the words below the screen are all the details for how you can give. It should be very, very simple, and I'm delighted by that figure of 200,000. But let's keep on forging ahead so that we can give to all these extraordinary and brilliant organizations that we're highlighting tonight. Now, almost by way of a reward, because you deserve a treat after that fantastic start to the proceedings, some live music. I did promise some, and we are about to have it now. It's music from the renowned singer and songwriter Achinoam Nini, or Noah, to use her international stage name. Over the last 3 decades, Noah has recorded 15 albums, many of them to great acclaim and huge sales and innumerable awards, particularly in the United States, but here too. She is, besides being a brilliantly gifted singer and performer, a really deeply committed peace activist, and she is indeed a member of the New Israel Fund board in Israel. She has been raising her voice, and what a voice, as you're going to hear in a minute. She's been raising her voice for the sake of democracy. I'm delighted to say that she has, as a sort of thank you really to all of us, everyone watching, recorded a song which we are going to hear, and she's recorded it especially for us. Before we get to that, she is going to give us, though, a valuable reminder of another significant event in a week of significant events, and that is the fact that we did pass an important milestone this week, 25 years since the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. You don't need me to say how important and significant that event was for people who believe in a fairer and better Israel. As you'll hear, the murder of the then Prime Minister came after a peace rally, and it was at that peace rally indeed where Noah was one of the performers. And here she is for us right now. Achinoam Nini, Noah.
Shalom. My name is Achinoam Nini, or Noah, and with me is Gil Dor, my musical collaborator and friend of many, many years. We're very honored to be taking part of this NIF UK event. I'm a board member of the New Israel Fund, so it's a particular pleasure and honor for me to be here with you tonight. 25 years ago, November 4th, Gil and I were standing on stage at the fateful peace rally that was meant to celebrate the courage and the tenacity shown by Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, who started the long journey to peace. 150,000 people, I think, or more, were there in that square that night, and Gil and I were singing on stage. It was joyous, it was beautiful, and it ended in terrible tragedy, as we all know. On that fateful night, Gil and I decided that if Yitzhak Rabin could sacrifice so much for peace, we too could sacrifice something, and have been raising our voices ever since. I've been thinking of Yitzhak Rabin a lot lately, as Israel has hit an all-time low. Hundreds of thousands of people are out in the streets, ourselves among them, demonstrating to save our democracy. You can see the flag, the black flag and the Israeli flag that is with me all the time, with us all the time. And I was thinking to myself that after this battle, this great battle, will have been won, we will then once again begin the long journey to peace that Yitzhak Rabin paid with his life for. This song that we're going to perform, a song by Shalom Chanoch, we sang at the also beautiful and enormous rally that took place after the murder. And it is that pain and that longing that has stayed with us ever since. זה עבר, זה נגמר, קצה חלום ודי, כל הזמן שנשר זה נגמר לתמיד אולי, מעגל שנסגר ונשארת חי. ניפגש נתראה, לב אוהב אינו טועה, כמו אל ים נזרום, נזרום, נבקש עד שנגיע וניגע אל החלום. זה עבר, זה נגמר לתמיד אולי, מעגל שנסגר ונשארת חי. ניפגש נתראה, לב אוהב אינו טועה, כמו אל ים נזרום, נזרום, נבקש עד שנגיע וניגע אל החלום. ניפגש נתראה, לב אוהב אינו טועה, כמו אל ים נזרום, נזרום, נבקש עד שנגיע וניגע אל החלום.
I hope you couldn't hear me singing along. Could have got embarrassing, slight swaying, may even have had the lighter out during that one. Beautiful song from Noah, and we thank her very much for providing the music for tonight, but also for her work for the New Israel Fund and for the cause of democracy. I'm glad to say we have, just while she was singing, put on another £10,000. So with the total standing at £210,000, £210,500 in fact. Do keep your donations coming in. You can give right now. Remember, escape from full screen, go through the notes below. It's embedded there. It's up to you. You can wait till we really put the squeeze on, because believe me, the heavy mob are coming to really put the squeeze on, or you can deal with me. And I'm trying to make it nicer. So it's up to you. It's your call. But the details are all there for you to make those donations. And whatever you can give, see if you can give a little bit more. Because it's really going to help these remarkable people we're hearing about tonight. Which brings me naturally to our second award, and it goes tonight to two organizations equally remarkable, and they work together. Our second set of winners are Women Against Violence and the Israel Women's Network. Now, the first of these, Women Against Violence, as the name suggests, they do work to protect women from violence, but not only that, they also work to improve the rights and the standing of Palestinian women in Israel. Meanwhile, the Israel Women's Network promotes equality for women in Israel across all aspects of everyday life, whether that be at work or at home, in the military, and indeed in religious life. And many of you may be familiar with the group's founder, something of a legendary figure in New Israel Fund circles, feminist and pioneer, Professor Alice Shalvey, who remains on the board of the New Israel Fund internationally. Now, as I hinted, what is special about these organizations, both of them amazing in their own right, is that they do work together side by side. An Israeli Jewish organization and an Israeli Arab organization working hand in hand, side by side, and never more so than during the current crisis. Now, again, the issues they're dealing with are also present here in this country during the pandemic, but they are particularly sharp, some of these issues in Israel. And by that, I'm not just referring to the fact that the domestic violence helplines have seen a 300% increase in their calls, people raising the alarm about domestic violence since the pandemic began. That's a tripling. But also, as you're going to hear in a moment, there are some very particular issues. And for example, Women Against Violence tackle the issue of early marriage, early forced marriage, in which, I was going to say women, we're really talking about girls of age 14 or 15 are forced against their will into these marriages. And we're going to be hearing about those in a moment. It's those sort of differences that make these questions and these issues all the more pressing for those dealing with them in the Israeli context. We're about to watch a film about these two groups' work. It's a powerful pair of films. I should warn you and brace you for that. But straight after that, you're going to hear a brief conversation I had with the two groups slightly earlier. And so, without further ado, the winners of tonight's second New Israel Fund Human Rights Award, the Israel Women's Network and Women Against Violence.
בתקופת הקורונה אנחנו ידענו שזה פשוט סבל, יהיה סבל עבור נשים נפגעות אלימות. לכלוא אותם בבתים, בבידוד, בתוך מערכת יחסים אלימה, בטח זה יהיה מצב של גיהנום עבור כל אישה שסובלת מאלימות.
מתחילת הקורונה עד היום אנחנו בערך כל הזמן אנחנו מלאים, המקלט מלא. אין לנו מקומות לרוב, ואם יש לנו מקום זה אומר שאישה היום יצאה, היום בערב יש לנו אישה אחרת שהיא מחכה למקום.
أنا كنت مضروبة، لما كان يجي يضرب. أنا أمي متوفية، فعملت أبوي، حكيت لأبوي إنه أنا عندي حدا بنت 14 اتجوزت، إنه أنا ما كانش بدي أكمل، كنت حاسة إنه في إشي عم بيصير مش منيح، فاتصلت لأبوي قلت له بديش أضل، تعالوا خدوني. عشان أنا اتصلت لأبوي قلت له تعال خدني، هو ما حبش هيك، فأكلت أول كف. أنا ما كنتش أطلع من البيت، أنا ما كانش معي تليفون، ممنوع. مرة كنا بالبحر أنا وأخته، رحنا ناكل بوظة، روحت كان موجود بالبيت، بتطلع من البيت بس بدون ما تحكي لي. انت على اساس فكرتي اصلا تطلع من البيت. جاب صابون غسيل ورماها بوجهي هيك، جاب كمان كاس. هسه انا بطلت قادرة اشوف قدامي، بطلت قادرة اتنفس. وبعدين جاب حليب وحط راسي تحت المغسلة وكب الحليب علي وكب المي علي. بس انا عن جد بطلت قادرة اشوف اشي، بطلت قادرة اتنفس. بس هذا اللي بتذكره، إن أنا بهذا الوقت ما كنتش قادرة أتنفس. فيش إشي تعمليه، بدك تتحملي. يوم ما طلعت من البيت كنت بعمل سفكانية، نادى علي، قعدني وين المجلة، قعدت غاد وخبط راسي بخزين المطبخ. إيش عم بيصير؟ أنا ما حكيتش إشي، بلش يضرب فيي، بس ضرب. أنا بتذكر بس ضرب. بعدها فوتني على الغرفة. تريس الشباك بيكون فيه بلاستيكات كثير، فخلع وحدة بلش يضرب فيها بس ضرب. بديش أحكي إيش صار بعدين. أنا حكيت يا إما بنتحر يا إما بطلع، بس وين رح أطلع بعدين؟ أنا فيش حدا وين أروح، كنت كلني مكسرة. بعدين أجا البوليس حكوا لي وين بدك تروحي؟ قلت لهم بعرفش، مش عندي حدا أروح. فحكوا لي على مأوى النساء المعنفات. كفتت كأنه انفتح باب وفتت فيه وتسكر. بعد وقت وأنا بالمأوى استوعبت هذا الإشي، لتهيك أنا حسيت إنه تمام في شي منيح عم بيصير.
המקום הזה הוא מבטיח ביטחון. נשים שחיו באיום על חייהם, שאין להם ביטחון באף אחד מי שנמצא סביבם. המעגל הזה שהן נמצאות בו זה מעגל מאוד קשה. והמקלט קודם כל מספק חוויה מתקנת. דבר שני, המקלט מספק מקום טיפולי, ומשם שתתחיל להתפתח גם, שהיא לא תחזור לאותו מעגל אלימות.
أنا ما كنتش أفكر إنه في ناس منيحة أصلاً بالمرة. كان في حدا بحبني، بيعطيني حب، بثق في، بسمعني بكل الحواس. في عبطة، أنا ما كانش حدا يعبطني، في حدا هيك عم بيهتم فيكي. عطوني كتير أشياء منيحة لحد هسه أنا حملتها معي وراح أحملها وين ما أروح كمان.
נשים נגד אלימות שברה טאבו בזה להגיד לנשים שסובלות מאלימות בתוך החברה שיש לכן לאן לפנות, שזכותכן ולמצוא אוזן קשבת שתתמוך בכן לאורך כל הדרך, וההחלטות הן רק שלכן, אך ורק שלכן.
It can't be a democracy in the 21st century in 2020 without strong women's rights. About 2 weeks after the first lockdown started here in Israel in March, the Prime Minister's office established roundtables regarding certain subjects, including how the corona pandemic affected and affects women here in Israel. This issue of domestic violence and violence against women is one of the main issues that we handled.
אני חושבת שאנחנו צריכים להיות מאוד ערים לאוכלוסיות שהן נחלשות בתקופה של משבר וקורונה, ואחת האוכלוסיות שנחלשות מאוד זה האוכלוסיות של הנשים. אני חושבת שהקורונה שמה לנו מול הפנים שהאי שוויון של נשים הוא הרבה יותר גדול. זה גם הוביל אותי להרחיב את תוכניות העוני בתחום הנשים, הוביל אותי להרחיב הרבה מאוד שירותים בתקופת הקורונה בנושא אלימות במשפחה. אני חושבת שהנושא הזה גם בעניין של מודעות של המשרד, גם בעניין של מודעות שלי מקבל הרבה מאוד בולטות.
As an advocacy organization, the fact that we can bring millions of shekels into a certain subject and to provide assistance to hundreds and thousands of women is something that is priceless in that matter.
The hotline is dedicated to provide legal aid for women at work regarding all aspects of labor law and employment law. The vast majority of workers being fired or being forced to take an unpaid leave are women.
אני מנהלת משאבי אנוש ושכר של חברת תיירות. קורונה תפסה אותי בתקופה של תחילת ההיריון יחסית. יצאתי לחופשה ללא תשלום. המשמעות של לצאת לחופשת לידה מחופשה ללא תשלום, זה שהדמי לידה שלי חושבו לפי התקופה שהייתי בחל"ת, שבה המשכורת שלי הייתה 70% ממה שהרווחתי בשוטף. וזה פחות כסף ל-15 שבועות שאני אמורה לחיות מהשכר הזה עם תינוקת ו3 ילדים. חד-הוריות, אין להם דרך להתקיים בכזאת צורה. כל התקופה הזאת השפיעה עליי מאוד 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 לרעה, והייתי רואה שחור פתאום, והתעלפתי משהו כמו 6-7 פעמים. נפלתי במדרגות, בחדר שינה, והם החליטו לאשפז אותי בהיריון בסיכון. השדולה עזרה לי בהתנהלות מול משרד הכלכלה והרווחה, שלבן אדם רגיל מהשורה לא ידע להתמודד איתם. החלום החלום שלי בשביל הבנות שלי זה שהם לא יצטרכו להתמודד מול החוסר שוויון המטורף, ושלא יסתכלו עליהם כרחם, אלא שיסתכלו עליהם כאישה עם מוטיבציה, אישה שרוצה להצליח, אישה שאפתנית, שרוצה לטרוף את העולם.
My feminist vision is that everyone, a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, will do whatever they want and not be blocked because of their gender.
بنفكر إنه المرأة حدا كثير ضعيف وإحنا بنقدر نتحكم فيه وبنأمنش بطاقاتهن الموجودة عندهن. بنفكر إنه النساء هن كائنات ضعيفة وبس، بس هن مش هيك.
פמיניזם זה לצאת נגד כל הדיכויים בעולם. וזו התקווה שלי גם, לעשות את העולם יותר טוב בשבילי וגם בשביל הילדים והילדות שלי, שיחיו בעולם טוב יותר, בעולם דמוקרטי, בעולם שמבוסס על ערכי זכויות אדם, זכויות נשים כזכויות אדם.
And so to the second of tonight's awards. As you know, this award is shared and one of the recipients is on the line now. I'm delighted to say we're joined from the organization Women Against Violence from the village of Araba. Khaltoum Hussein is on the line. Khaltoum, many, many congratulations on winning this Human Rights Award. And I know that you work for the organization, but you've also been personally a beneficiary of its work. Tell us about that.
First of all, thank you, Jonathan. And I'm honored to represent WAV here to receive this award. And of course, it's a great honor and privilege for us at WAV to receive the NIF UK Human Rights Award for this year. I'm a beneficiary of WAV because I reached to WAV to work at WAV through an employment bazaar that they were holding. And at that point in 2009, I was desperate because I'm a survivor of an early marriage, and I struggled to continue my academic degree. I struggled to get out to employment, and when I finished my degree, I found myself unemployed. So this opportunity basically gave me life, and it wasn't a regular opportunity because at WAV, I've learned how to survive as a mother, how to live my complex identity as a woman, as a Palestinian woman, as a woman citizen of Israel, and also as a human. I usually identify myself like Khaltoum before WAV and Khaltoum after WAV. And
that's extraordinary, actually. So I was just going to say, just to hear that this is really an organization that, in your words, has saved your life. That is very, very moving to hear that. And what it makes clear is that this organization, despite the name Women Against Violence, it does much more than just deal with violence.
Of course. Like I wouldn't identify myself as a victim of violence, but I'm a survivor of traditional issues that have put me down for many years. And WAV's work in the very first year since its establishment was to provide services for women victims of violence and sexual assault, starting with the first Arabic-speaking center in Israel, followed by the first Arabic shelter for battered women and their children in the Middle East, and followed by other services. And after that, we saw the importance to work with the society itself, because the society has the problem and it can also be part of the solution. So we started working with youth groups in the schools across the country, providing raising awareness workshops. And from there, we developed leadership youth groups across the country as well. And these leadership youth groups received the training from WAV and got back to their communities and also provided trainings for other youth. And like this, we have created a feminist youth network that spread the vision of WAV and the feminist message, all over the Arab community in Israel.
You're describing for us there the work that WAV does in the Arab community of Israel. Yes. Obviously, tonight's award is shared with your sister organization, IWN. Tell us about the relationship and the meaning of that for you.
Of course, WAV has like a main role in creating coalitions with civil society organizations, with Arab civil society organizations and Jewish civil society organizations. So we have been in coalition with IWN to work in preventing violence against women, and we share our advocacy efforts together to promote women issues and to put women issues on the agenda of the decision makers.
Now, tonight, Khaltoum, we are raising funds for the New Israel Fund, as you know. Tell us what support means to you when you are receiving grants and support and aid from the New Israel Fund. How important is it for the work you and the groups and the women you work with and represent do?
First of all, I would like to thank the NIF supporters. I would like to tell them that they are not only supporters for us. The success of our cause, it's their success as well, because they are partners to us.
And as you say, it makes a difference for individual women like you and your words, whose lives have been saved by the work your organization has done and is doing. Khaltoum Hussein from the Women Against Violence group, WAV, recipient of one of tonight's Human Rights Awards. Thank you once again and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.
And I'm delighted to welcome the Executive Director of the Israel Women's Network, Michal Gera Margoliot. Michal, many congratulations indeed.
Many thanks, and many thanks to all NIF UK supporters for their ongoing support. We were incredibly honored to receive this prize from the NIF. The New Israel Fund has supported the IWN since its establishment in 1984, and our organization share core values and beliefs.
Now, obviously, we've heard a lot about the organization itself. I'm interested, though, with you and your own personal motivation, in some ways, your personal story of what brought you to this organization and the work it does.
Actually, since childhood, I had a very strong sense of justice. I was raised in an Orthodox home in Jerusalem, and I was always so frustrated by the differences in the boys and girls who were allowed to do and dream. My feminist inclination developed very early in my childhood, and later on, at about age 16, when I realized I was in love with a girl, I was convinced I was the only lesbian in the world. Working in the Knesset, I was exposed to the significant change that policy promotion can make, and I felt that this is how I can combine my legal education with my desire to promote gender equality and to make Israel a better place.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I mean, in the film, we saw what you're doing in this current crisis, but obviously the Israel Women's Network predates coronavirus. You've been around a long time. Just give us some sense of the work you do beyond this current crisis.
I think one of the difficult issues to nail has always been equal pay. It seems that no matter what we do, the pay gap between men and women remains steady. And in Israel, it's around 32 to 35%. And we had the opportunity to represent two women who turned to our hotlines in a landmark case in the port of Ashdod after they discovered that a colleague recruited for the exact same managerial level was earning 6,000 shekels a month more than each of them. We represented them in court. They won. We won. And one of them has even been taking their president case on lectures around the country. Another source of pride for me and us was, which was resolved this week, in fact. It was a woman who turned to us after a public bus driver refused to let her board his bus, claiming she wasn't dressed properly. since she was wearing shorts. Just a few days ago, the bus company, ACRI Transportation, was forced to compensate her to the tune of 150,000 shekels. And we hope this decision sends a clear warning signal to anyone attempting to enforce an illegal, demeaning modesty code in a democratic country. Sadly, the exclusion of women has been leaking to more and more public spheres in Israel in recent years.
And listen, you've got now, Michal, an audience of people here, sitting here in London, in the UK. We're watching you online tonight. Is there a message you have for them, for us, and what they can do to support the work you're engaged in?
I think a lot of people in Israel, myself included, have relatives and friends in the diaspora. And if I may consider everyone here tonight a friend of the IWN, we value your support tremendously, sharing with you the issues that drive our work. We hope that you will bring them into your communities and networks and influence the discourse in the UK about the complexity of life in Israel.
And of course, that support translated best into giving resources, giving funding, giving money tonight, so you can help the Israel Women's Network and groups like it fighting for equality, equal rights, equal representation in Israel. Michal Gera Magaliot, thanks very much for joining us. And once again, Mazal Tov, congratulations on this award.
Thank you so much. It really is a huge pleasure.
Well, you heard it there directly from those involved here. They do regard you, us, as partners. And I'm delighted to say that people are heeding the call. We are getting a terrific response, and the total now stands at £241,000, £241,905. Every pound counts. It helps, as you heard there, fighting against domestic violence, but also helping women fight against discrimination, whether that's at work or even in terms of how they're treated when they get on the bus, depending on what they're wearing. These are the groups, said it at the beginning, brilliant groups doing noble work, and the New Israel Fund helps them and funds them. Now, I have to announce that we are having a sort of Pennsylvania-style slight delay. It's not going to go on for 3 or 4 days. I promise you, just a few minutes before the hour is up. And I also promised you that we were going to send in the heavy mob to really put the squeeze on, and that moment has now come. I am delighted to be joined by the Chair of Trustees for the New Israel Fund here in the UK, and that is, of course, Clive Sheldon, QC. Clive should be joining us any moment, and we can put to him the demand I've been saying. I said, that we're going to send in the heavy mob. I've been playing good cop, Clive. Is it now your turn to be bad cop?
Time to be bad cop, Johnny. Thank you very much for the introduction. I've just been told that we've broken the £250,000 barrier, which is fantastic. But there's obviously a little bit more to go, and I hope that we can get that figure up. So earlier this evening, you heard Mickey Gitzin, the executive director of NIF in Israel, set out the work that NIF has been doing so that in this crisis, no one is left behind. The New Israel Fund's task is to see the big picture and help all Israelis make it through, whatever their background and regardless of the card the COVID pandemic has dealt them. We are able to do this because for decades, we've been developing and supporting the organizations at the grassroots within all communities across Israel. It is these very organizations who have responded quickly, and we've brought them together to demand change from the top down. Your continued support has ensured we can do this together. Our winners tonight, ACRI, Women Against Violence, and the Israel Women's Network are just 3 examples of the vital nature of this work. Protecting democracy, shielding the most economically vulnerable, and empowering women. I ask tonight that you continue your vital role in supporting NIF. Our work is not only about responding to the crisis now, but also looking to the day after, to ensure that the vision of Israel that we share is not left behind. That vision is shared by NIF supporters worldwide. Just before she passed away, US Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a hero to me and to many of us, had been honored by the American institution, the National Constitution Center. RBG directed her prize money to organizations that meant the most to her. We recently learned that one of these organizations was the New Israel Fund. This was a humbling and inspiring gesture from RBG. It strengthens my faith in NIF as a powerful vehicle to promote justice, equality, and democracy in Israel. I ask you tonight to build on RBG's donation and to help NIF to continue its incredible work. So I ask you to take a few minutes now to fill in your NIF donation form that is embedded just below our live stream. And if you're watching this on full screen, you need to minimize the window and scroll down. At this time, your support really means more than ever. Please be as generous as you can be, and we'll be waiting for you here when you scroll back up. Thank you.
Clive, that in her will, really her bequest, one of the charities that was favored by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, no less, was the New Israel Fund. In other words, if you want to follow the wisdom of one of those great justices and legal minds in American history, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all you have to do is donate to the New Israel Fund, and you are in very, very good company. In fact, talking of being in good company, I know that one of the joys of these events when we're in person, one of the perhaps guilty pleasures, is looking across the room, spotting people you know, going to have a little chat, maybe judging their outfits a little bit, seeing who's put on weight since the previous year. Don't pretend you don't do it. I know you do. But this year we don't have that pleasure. We just have been denied that. So by way of a substitute, I thought we would show you this lovely montage of some of those people who have supported the New Israel Fund, either through work or through their cash donations here or abroad, with each of them telling us what the New Israel Fund means to them.
What does NIF mean to us? It means everything that is good and hopeful in Israeli society.
And it means a community of stubbornly optimistic people working hard to make the country a better place. A place we can all be proud of.
NIF is about empowering people to make Israel the most just, fair, and democratic society it can be.
I believe in the Israel that honors and respects all its inhabitants, as well as its founding vision. And I'm committed to NIF because it is the most effective vehicle working to protect and promote these values.
NIF for me is about community and solidarity.
There is no better organization than NIF, who through its grantees is consistently making a difference on all of these areas. New Israel Fund to me is the Israel I want to see.
NIF to me is a reminder that there are people who still care and advocate for equal rights in Israel. It is where I get my energy to keep fighting for human rights and equality for people in my country.
New Israel Fund is an organisation that mobilises for change. We've seen the results.
The New Israel Fund is how I can both love Israel and express my progressive and my Jewish values at the same time.
I'm standing next to the olive tree in my garden as a symbol of how much I appreciate the opportunity to support the New Israel Fund, who brings healing, inclusivity, opportunity, and equality to strengthen the democracy of Israeli society.
The NIF in 3 words.
Hope.
Justice.
Home.
مساواة, حرية, amal.
Hello everybody. It's a privilege to be with you all, to congratulate the award winners and to praise the New Israel Fund. I love your vision of Israel. I admire the way you fight for what you care about: democracy, equality, justice for all. It's what I care about.
To me, NIF represents an Israeli society that we can all be proud of, and a more just Israel for us all.
The NIF in one word. The NIF creates a pathway for organizations and people that want to make Israel more democratic for more people.
The work of NIF means that I can be proud of the people and country I love, and that Israel can truly be for everyone if we just tried.
Dear NIF members, thank you for your most important and generous work throughout the year.
I think that the best way to support Israel, short of emigrating there, is to donate to the New Israel Fund.
NIF in 3 words: justice, justice, and justice.
How about that then? You see, you can follow the footsteps of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You can be like Anthony Julius and Claudia Roden and Noah Rotman, the granddaughter of Yitzhak Rabin, with her special message. All you have to do is be a supporter of the New Israel Fund, and you can do that still. The form is still there by giving. Astonishingly, the figure has risen to £269,025. That is an amazing total that we've reached. All of you by giving so generously. That is fantastic. And I'm hugely grateful. If you haven't done so already, you still can. Remember, just come out of full screen and find all the details below, and you are going to feel as good and be as healthy, beautiful, attractive, and as intelligent as all the people you just saw there. All you have to do is be a fellow New Israel Fund giver. We are very nearly there. I do feel slightly like I'm the guy on CNN giving the new figures of votes counted in Nevada, as I tell you that we have hit that figure of 269,000. That is wonderful. Let me say a couple of things. If you want to give after this is finished, remember you still can on the New Israel Fund website, newisraelfund.org.uk. You can do that anytime. If you feel you want to even top up the contribution you've made, you can do that there. And I do thank all of our supporters who've taken the leap with us tonight into the virtual unknown by joining us and migrating online. Other thank yous. We should thank all the people behind the scenes who made tonight possible, the people in the New Israel Fund office, Adiva, Atira, and Adam. I think we should also give a little mention to the chair of the Human Rights Award Dinner Committee of the New Israel Fund, Trustee Sarah Peters. I might be able to relay those thanks in person after this broadcast, but also, really, I suppose, above all, thank you to all of you for being such staunch supporters of this fund. Like I say, extraordinary people doing noble work to make a fairer and better Israel. You have done your part tonight. Keep on giving, keep on engaging, and let's hope, final thought, that we all can do this again next year in person. From me, Jonathan Friedland, thank you all very much for watching. Thanks for giving, and good night.